Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Brave Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Jena Rodriguez, and I'm your transformational mentor and business strategist. And I'm here to help you eradicate fear, unblock what you need to unblock to have the life and business that you really desire. And we have another amazing guest with us, Shasta Townsend, and I am just so excited to dive into this conversation. First of all, she has the coolest background behind her, and we have our colors going on, and so I can only imagine her creative spirit and all of the amazing wisdom that she has to share. So welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love everything you're doing, Jena, and I'm grateful to be here. Hello, everybody who's watching and listening.
Yes, we have such a wonderful community of brave masters out there, and I know this conversation will empower them to be even more so. And so first and foremost, go ahead and introduce you and what your business and your work in the world is all about.
Yeah, thank you. I am actually a multipreneur, so I actually own 4 different businesses.
Wow.
I am Canadian. I'm actually First Nations Canadian. So if you don't know what that is, I'm Cree. So I have a kind of unique maybe background or perspective on things. And I really have both a wellness business, a yoga studio, and then I actually do a lot of transformational coaching for women in the sphere of both business and work-life balance. And
Yes.
My background is basically I grew up very, very poor, and it was actually entrepreneurship that shifted everything for me, which I know we're going to talk about. So,
Sure.
yeah, that's kind of my deals. I love business. I love entrepreneurship. I love figuring out how we can step into our possibility, as women, as men, and just really create what we're here to create and live a really good life. That's actually what I'm really passionate about. And one of the other businesses I have with my husband, it's really about creating what we want in our life without sacrifice, both, in the bedroom, in our bank account, in our business. So that's kind of my big why I get out of bed in the morning is like, how can I really help? How can I live it, but how can I also help other people really live a life without sacrifice?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really connected to you with, and my own passion is that conversation without sacrifice and the balance. And of course, I don't know what your take is. I don't think balance is equal. I think balance is a sense of flow and a sense of ease and a sense of being able to have everything you want, but everything works. And so I always like to kind of dismantle this. Balance doesn't mean 50-50 or 25-25-25-25. It just means, being able to have all the different things that you desire, and they actually work together in harmony. I think balance is, maybe more about harmony than anything. And I just really, I dug into your website, and you've got such a powerful website. I mean, just the imagery and the presence of it and the conversation around that really spoke to me as well. And I was like, great, we're going to have an awesome conversation. So take us back obviously to the beginning, a little bit more of, I know for me, I had to, and I haven't fully arrived at the destination, but I have to arrive at the awareness of that. So what did you have to kind of go through and overcome in order to recognize this in yourself?
I actually, and maybe many people can relate to this who are listening or watching. So I actually started out with a career in corporate. And this is leading me to answer your question, because it's actually I think a significant place where, many of us, for me, and to go back to your, where you're talking about desire. So for me, when I grew up, as I said, very poor. And my mother was always like, education is the answer. Education is the answer. Get a good job, work for somebody. So I never grew up with a mindset of entrepreneurship. I grew up, as I said, very poor. And I even had a kind of a view like rich people are assholes. So,
Got it.
But the story was, go to school and get a good like corporate job, which I did. So coming out of university, I was working for one of the largest companies in Canada and moving up the ladder really quickly, but I was miserable. Like, I mean, performing really well at my job, but miserable and feeling like my ladder was against the wrong wall. And so this, in my late 20s, like I moved up the corporate ladder quite quickly because, of course, I was a major go-getter. I had sort of this epiphany of like, I literally cannot do this for another 30 years. Like my body, everything's breaking down. And the interesting thing is, it wasn't a culture at the time, like our culture, I'm 45 now, so this is, not quite 20 years ago, but is the entrepreneurship mindset wasn't as prevalent then in, the late 90s, early 2000s. But I was just like, I can't do this. I literally cannot do this anymore. And I did the whole like eat, pray, love thing. I wish I had written the book back then. I like took a break from my life. I went to India. I was very much on a spiritual journey and a yoga journey and figuring out who the heck I was as a woman and an individual. And I think that for me was really a shifting point of understanding that I had been buying into the story that my family told me about who I should be and what I should be doing with my life. And I had never actually really questioned that myself. So I think one of the things that I know you do this work, it's something that I do with people. It's like, actually you have to get clear on what you do want in your life. And I think that takes a lot of courage. And most of us are actually no clue, we haven't been trained to ask for what we want. And you do disrupt things, I mean, I remember at the time where I was like leaving this like $80,000 a year job, which in your 20s seemed like a shitload of money. It still is today. And my friends were like, are you having a mental breakdown? Like, what is wrong with you? And I think it's also why communities like you have, like I have, are so important when we are stepping into entrepreneurship and growing ourselves and growing our business, because we are breaking with the cultural paradigm. So, from that point, I left my career and I traveled for a little bit. And then when I came back to Canada, I started a business, and I kind of laughed because I didn't necessarily have the same, obviously, like skills, mindset, or planning or strategy that I have now. But it was very successful. And I really found my joy and my passion, and I loved helping people, and I loved growing, and I loved figuring things out. So I've actually been in the world of entrepreneurship now for 17 years, and it just, keeps growing, taking it from a very small business into 7-figure business and multiple from there. And I think that, that the 29-year-old me would have never seen this as a possibility. So the one thing, to really answer your question, I think for me was, again, this willingness of really asking myself, like, what do you really want to do with your life? Like, you really need to get present to this. Because at the time I also had major anxiety, was on all kinds of medication. I haven't been on medication, basically since I left my career. And I thought,
it's interesting how that helps.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, there's no question that it does take courage to ask those questions and step into entrepreneurship, but I would not trade this for anything. Like, I love what I do. I love my life. I love, driving. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, eloquently. And yes. And I love, so it's so funny because I love doing these podcasts, because then I'm like, my sister, because I was same story pretty much, like grew up, poor, food stamps, homeless at times, meaning, couch hopping and just hardships, and yet had a dad that was like, get a college degree, go to corporate, sit in a cubicle. And I was in corporate for quite a while and feeling the same, $80,000 a year. So it was just very similar in my 20s. And then, made that leap of faith into entrepreneurship. And it's interesting, I've actually had more of a kind of a spiritual reawakening in the last year, like just this last year. And so kind of the next, I feel like it's that next level Like I had one back in the 20s because clearly I was like, I got to do something different. And so, yeah, just wait for the next one. And here we are. You said some amazing things I want to anchor. One is, and I talk to this too, is this conversation about the stories that we adopt that are actually not our own, right? Like the stories and the beliefs and the conditioning, and that we say is so, we take them on and then we own them. So it's not about them. But you know, like I would love for you to speak a little bit more to that. Like I think, and maybe how you've transformed that, because I believe you're right. I think what we struggle with early on is we don't have the tools, we don't have the awareness, we don't have the how do I actually transform this so that I no longer have to, you know, I can find the courage and the brave to ask the hard questions and to step into it. Because it's one thing to ask the question and get an answer and then run from the answer. First of all, that's another part of this. But first, yeah, share, right? Been there. And so I would love to know your a little more perspective about those kind of early adopted stories.
Well, I mean, we know from neuroscience and really social, relationship studies that before the age of 7, I mean, you got to really think about this. Before the age of 7, we have actually formed very foundational beliefs about who we are, beliefs about money, beliefs about sex, beliefs about like all of the major, sort of like storylines in our culture. And how do they get formed? They get formed by repeated exposure. So you got to think about how you grew up. Yep. And they get formed by traumatic experiences or emotionally resonant experiences. So, I remember being really young and my parents lost their house. Like they were horrible with money. We had a house for a short period of time, going out of rental, like low income rental housing into, oh my God, they actually bought a house and they lost it. And I'll tell you, Jena, like for a long time in my life, I had to be like, I was kind of like on this lockdown mode of like, when is someone going to take this away from me? When am I going to lose this stuff? And so, I always say to my clients and my students, one of the fastest ways to really know what are the subconscious patterns, and this is the thing, is we grew up this way, whether you grew up in an affluent family or like us in a family that struggled with money, is it doesn't matter. We've all adopted, again, whatever you saw as the ongoing pattern and whatever, emotionally charged experiences you've had. And those things are subconscious. They go way back into our brain. We don't even know why we can't get to where we want to get to in our life. And it's because of these subconscious beliefs. So one of the fastest ways to actually just bring those to the surface is to actually ask yourself a question like, what did I see my parents or my family or my culture doing with regard to money, business, entrepreneurship, sense of self, whatever area, sexuality, relationship, and like really look at that. Because even if you think you rejected it, so for me, I was like, I'm not ever going to live like this. I'm not going to live in this kind of poverty and, BS. But the interesting thing is that I was creating in my life out of fear. I was creating out of like, not intentionality, but like, oh shit, I don't want to end up like my parents. So I hadn't really reconciled that. So, the first thing is that if we want to take back the power in our life, we don't want to be victims of our childhood, of our culture, of our own thinking. I ask people that question all the time, and it's amazing what we don't notice, and to really look at what are the stories that your parents told you about money, and then just start to decide for yourself, like, do I want to accept this or do I want to reject this? And then the thing that I also do is I'm super conscious of that. Like there's stuff that still comes up for me that I'm like, oh shit, that's like my 7-year-old talking. And I think that this is the opportunity, is like we make a decision to be conscious. I don't think it has to be hard. It doesn't have to take a long time. Things can shift really fast. But for me, this is a big thing that I did in my life and that I really teach my clients, like how to get present to those voices. And then you have to make a decision about the voices. There's also things your parents gave you that are helpful. But like I said, I had such a struggle of like, is it okay to leave the corporate world? And, my parents, my mom thought that was the safe way. And most of the time, that's what we want to remember, is that our parents are trying to teach us what they think is safe. It wasn't safe. That's not safe for me to be in corporate, America.
Right.
But in my mom's mind, that was safety to her. And
Yes.
I didn't want to live like that. So it's to get conscious of those voices, and then you just make a decision about the voices. And I
Hmm.
think the other thing is for me, I went through really a period of like not holding my parents responsible, not holding my family responsible, not holding my culture responsible. So I was just free. I wasn't in like a blame mode or like,
Yes.
I'm very grateful because those experiences shaped me into who I am.
Right.
But it's actually quite simple, but most of us have never been trained to actually be like, hang on a second, I need to look at, what's the story I have going on? Is it working for me or not working for me? And if it's not working for me, then to make a new decision. And I will say this, I always work with a mentor. You probably do too, Jena, and it's what
Hmm.
you do and it's what I do.
Right.
And the thing about subconscious belief in these stories, and I'm sure you've seen it within your community and your clients, is it's why you need a good teacher, a good mentor, because there's stuff that still comes up for me that I'm like, I think something in my mentor will be like, that's your old stuff coming up. And I help that, and I know you do too, with your clients, of saying like, that's outdated thinking or middle class thinking. So it can be really helpful, to get support as I think for the rest of our lives, really.
Yeah.
But as
Forever.
we, grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is good. This is so good. And we do. I absolutely have the same kind of line of thought, and have gone through that process of de-victimizing myself, right, and taking full personal responsibility so that I have the ability to choose. I think we live in a world where we are hostage to our conditioned, adopted beliefs and stories that are subconscious, right? Until we are willing to go, I think there's another way to look at this, and I think there's something underneath that I need to learn, and be willing to do the hard work. Not that, like you said, it doesn't have to be hard, but it can bring up the painful things that we don't want to look at. And so we have to be
Sure.
willing to experience whatever that is, and in order to have the gold on the other side. And I just really second that. I speak to people all the time about, that they want to. It was interesting because I just did a master class, and it was, people were listing their to-dos, like, this is what I need to get done. And I'm like, but that's a to-do list. That's not a desire list. And then notice how the to-do list is the same every single day, and you don't get to it. And so it's like, when we do not take the actions, whatever they are, like, there's something in the way, emotionally and unconsciously, that we have to look at, in order, because those to-do lists would be done. They would be gone. They'd be done, if we really,
Absolutely.
not on repeats, not on move it to the next day, move it to the next day, move it to the next year, move it, right? It's like my whole weight release journey for 14 years. Like, I just kept moving into the next year, and yet that all of that release was about emotional stuff. And so once I was ready to
Mhm.
look at it, then I released 60 pounds. It's like, hello. So that's just an example of how we hold ourselves hostage, in some way. And so thank you for that. I think that's super powerful for people to hear. And I encourage you to play repeat on this on this episode. So let's talk a little bit about, so clearly, you've had to move yourself through, that process, and certainly, and you said it's like, where you came from to where you are now is obviously a night and day experience. What was kind of that pivotal moment that really allowed you to step into, I because so many of us want to know, how do we get to the financial win, right? Or,
Yeah.
the certainly that's a big, like you said, storyline in our culture, in our lives. What was that very pivotal moment that allowed you to become that abundance? And I'm just curious what that looks like for you.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I get asked this question all the time because, you know, I have sort of like a rags to riches story, and it's what I help people do is like massively increase their income.
Right.
And I'm always like, what did I do? What's the recipe? So here's the first thing. Um, there was always something in me that didn't want to settle.
Yeah.
Like there was always something in me that was like, and I'll tell you, there's, you know, as I said earlier, there's childhood experiences that are very emotionally charged. And this sounds like a funny
Hmm.
one, but when I was maybe like 8 or 9, I grew up in a very poor area. So I went with a friend to one of her friends' houses in a more affluent area of town. And they lived in a really nice house. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I remember being like, you know, 8, 9, maybe 10 going, oh shit, you know, this is what I want one day. And not that it's all about material gains. I'm not saying that. I'm saying though that for me, I was like, I want more.
Yes.
And I actually think that humans are wired with a desire for more. We have
Hmm.
spirit, we have essence, whatever you want to call it, life force moving through us. We're wired for more, but most of us are taught and trained to shut that down. We don't want to be greedy or whatever the
Yes.
storyline is. Um, but for me, I always wanted more. So that now, I'm not saying I didn't struggle with that or call myself wrong, but I always sought out learnings, teachers, opportunities to figure out how can I create that. The other
Hmm.
thing is, I had a point in my life where I think it was really around this time where I was kind of on my knees in my life. I was really unhappy. And I had this epiphany, you know, around like 28, 29, like, okay, I have all the markers of external success that my family, my culture told me I should have. I have a great downtown apartment. I live a great party life. I have a very high flying career. You know, I'm on my path to making 6 figures probably by the time I'm 30, and I am miserable. So,
Right.
what gives here? Like, there's got to be something going on. And it really led me to ask myself, you know, as we've been talking about, what do you really want? And this is just something that I think again and again. And then even when that's kind of the same cycle that I've always been on, Jena, even when I started my first business, you know, and we were doing maybe like just under 6 figures. And then I was like, I want this to be rocking. And then we tripled that. And then I tripled again, you know, went over to 7 figures. And there was always a desire of, what more can I offer the world? How much more can I be in service to
Hmm.
people? What do I really want to do with my life? Because it's not about, for me, like the money isn't the reason I'm doing it, but the money is a symbol of how much value I'm offering the world, but also how much I'm challenging myself. You know,
Yes,
I could have
that's
sat
true.
at 100,000 a year. And there were times in my life when I look at the key decisions that I made, I was like, I'm not willing to settle for this.
Yes.
And as I said earlier, I've always hired mentors who were down the road than me, people who were doing things that I wanted to do, making more money, more experience, and who could really hold me to my bullshit, basically, like, you got to
Right.
stop. Um, you know, and in the last couple of years, when I tripled the income again and went well over 7 figures, you know, because I just was asked this question, I really was at a point in my life where I was like, I have a pretty good life. But I don't want to settle. And I need someone to help me see, where am I stopping myself
Yes.
and how much more can I offer the world. And I think that's kind of the recipe for success that, you know, I think it's very replicable and
Right.
easy. I'm not special, you know, I'm not a special
Yeah,
person at
I got
all.
it.
It's those are the decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's really good. I say that. I'm like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, this is not something special. Like, there is a recipe, there is a process, there is an availability, a possibility for everyone that
Mm-hmm.
finds themselves in a place they don't want to be. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, girl, you're speaking my language one more time. I'm like, that's exactly how I shifted out of it as well. And I was trying to think, I was writing it down. If you saw me looking down, I'm looking at my notes, because I was like, is there anything else I really added, or not didn't do? I know I did all of that. And I think that's so important, that we recognize and have the ownership that we are wired for more. And something I say is I want the most out of life, not just more, right? So it's a sense of there is a higher purpose to all of this, and
Yeah.
not settling. And the moment
Yeah.
that our ego, right, tells us, oh, you don't need all that, or immediately judge someone's success and comparison and say that's,
Totally.
they're wrong for having it, or they're, I think it's just a matter of coming back to a place of love and compassion and celebration for others is probably one of the first steps for me. Was because I was so focused, that ego was so focused on what I didn't have, and I didn't have, and I didn't have, and I didn't have, and looking at others going, they have, I don't, they have, I don't, right? And that just will literally keep you in the spin. And I hear that a lot with clients and stuff, is just the pattern. It's one more pattern of seeing it that way. And if we can break the pattern by adding in just an ounce of compassion, celebration, and appreciation for their success. Because something, and I'd love to know your take on this, is like, when I see someone else, and now I've had to come to this, right? This habit is when I see someone else and I want what they have. Like you said, you went to a friend's house and was like, oh, wow, but I think what happens is we immediately see possibility in that second. We go, oh, wow, if this exists. And yet then our egos go, well, we can't have it, and we don't have it. And how can I ever have that? And right, the limitation, especially as children or teenagers, or, young. And so if we can become habitual about looking at the possibility and then immediately celebrating it for them, and then knowing, in order for us to ever have anything new, anything more, like we're talking about, like wanting more, we first have to identify what more looks like. So what if those experiences are showing up for us, those comparisons are showing up for us, so that we can actually choose them versus resent them, right? And go, go back into our ego self. So I don't know. I'm just curious if that too is an experience for you. I know that's something I practice a lot. It does not mean I don't fall into comparison mode. But yeah, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything that you said. And I think that, yeah, we're living in an amazing time because there is so much visibility, but we are living in a time of massive comparison. So it is to be very cognizant of how we're getting triggered by, the news feed. And I think the thing that I often coach people on is when you feel envy or you feel resentful, it's exactly what you said, Jenna. I really see that as like, oh, there's a part of you, there's a part of me that wants something. And for whatever reason, there's an internal belief about it. So either I can't have it, or there's some projection, then there's some belief, which then we go into projection. We're like, screw you for having that. I wouldn't dare to ask for that, or I haven't figured that out yet. And I always say, I mean, I'm a very envious or jealous person, but it's really that when I see someone and I can feel that, like, oh, am I behind, or I should be there? That's more my internal story of like, oh, I should be further along the road. And I have to actually be like compassionate almost to myself,
100%.
and just really celebrating myself, and then saying, well, what is it that you do want, and why, what is the story coming up? But I do think definitely in this culture of comparison, it's really easy to get down on yourself, and we need to be really mindful of that, because we know that, then we're going to attract more opportunities to feel like shit about ourselves, basically.
Right.
And I see it more, there is also the other side is I look for models of inspiration, and I really would invite everybody listening and watching, and it doesn't have to be like Oprah Winfrey. We're talking about, someone who or somebody in your sphere, could be, an influencer, a media person, your mentor, whatever. But it's really like those models of inspiration and possibility. And for me, the story is more like, if they can do it, I can do it. And when I actually think back to that like 8-year-old girl, what's interesting is she actually didn't have a story of like, I can't do this. She was like, I'm going to freaking do this. This is where I went, whoa, people live like this. And
Right.
that childlike determination, and that's more for me where I'm like, anything is possible. You live in a world where you're creating your reality. So anytime that emotion comes up of whatever it might be, comparison or envy or jealousy, to be like, that's just a part of you. As you said, Jena, the universe or that aspect of yourself that's saying,
Yes.
pay attention to this because there's something here that you want and you're preventing yourself. And then you move into projection and nobody like that's, we can be compassionate for ourselves because I don't really like that side of myself. Fortunately, she doesn't come out very often, but it's also like when she does, I'm like, oh shit, Shasta. But I have to be
thought
like,
I was
that's
done
okay.
with you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have we not said enough mantras here? But, we can be real. That we have a wide range of human emotion. We're still human. And to really like almost take it lightly and like love yourself and laugh at yourself, but then be like, okay, I need to actually pay attention to this, not just go into victim mode and projection.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So powerful. Well said. And I think it's just a testament to like, we're never done. We're never done. We just get better and better and learn along the way of more about ourselves, more about other people, more about how we relate to the world and the possibility within that. Right. And so, thank goodness for the lessons. Thank goodness for the contrast, as I always say. I'm like, yes, you and me both, we had the poor experience, and it doesn't mean you have to have that in order to have contrast. Except it's just like whatever contrast you have had in your life, whatever, I don't want that, I want this, or I had that and this is what I really desire. It's like lean into what is that telling you? What is the possibility and the awareness and all of that can show up because it's coming into your world, and then I think we have the freedom to choose. And if we don't feel free to choose, like we feel like we have to do something or we should do something, I think that's the trick is right there. That moment is the time to go, what's going on for me, right? Like what's really happening here? Because I feel like our nature and our intrinsic gift is that we are here to have freedom of choice, and yet we have to find that that capability inside of us, right? So I could talk to you all day. This has been amazing and powerful and really, I feel like more of this conversation has to occur for people to actually have all these things that they say they want, whether materialistically or financially or relational or whatever. And it's like, this is the conversation that I think it's almost like we're saying it and we need to keep saying it, right? It's like you said, the patterns in our brain are in, our brain patterns. We have to keep making this pattern happen in order for people to start to recognize it and choose that new conversation. But I think it's interesting how loud this is getting, and we need to get louder about it, in my opinion. So thank you for being that messenger as well. My partner in crime. Let's do this, right?
Yes, amazing.
And amazing. Yeah, you're welcome. And so please share with everyone how they can connect with you and learn more about your badass self and what does that look like?
Yeah, the easiest way is my website is shastatownsend.com, and my name is actually super easy to spell, Shasta, and then Townsend, TOWNSEND.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, and my Instagram feed is really much more around female leadership, female entrepreneurship, and just this inspirational conversation that you and I have had. So if you're an Instagram follower and you like the mindset conversation, that's another way to connect with me.
Perfect. And I know I always invite my guests to give something of value to the audience and listeners. And so you have a free gift for them. What's that all about?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot today really about mindset, and it's going from a poverty mindset or middle class mindset even into really a success mindset. So I actually created, I call it a report on how millionaire women actually think about money, and it really challenges a lot of the cultural beliefs that we have about money, but also really looking at some of the deep-seated stories that we have as women about money. So it is, just a great, quick, digestible thing to really start looking at what are the beliefs that I have about money and what I want to step into from that success mindset.
Amazing. Amazing. And I have the link as shastatownsend.com/millionaire-women. Is that the right link?
That's it.
Does that sound good?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll put that in the show notes. And I appreciate you
Thank
giving
you.
that gift to everyone. That's amazing. I'll have to check it out myself. I love learning, and especially from amazing people like you. So final question is, if this was your very last interview, if this was the last public display of your message and conversation, if this was it, what would be the message you want to leave with the world?
Oh gosh. Wow, that's a profound question. That there is a vast possibility and potential within you. And that's actually what I think we're really here to explore, to really step into our possibility and potential.
Love it. Love, love, love. So thank you so much. It's so great to meet you. So great to share you with everyone. And I can't wait to see what we do next. And thank you for being here. And just really appreciate it. So to everyone, yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. And to everyone listening and watching, please give us feedback. Let us know. Leave a review on iTunes if you would. Would love, I know she would and I would, is to understand how this impacts you and what's opening up for you. So would love your comments and feedback and love and support. And until the next episode, until the next time I see you, let's go get our brave on. Talk to you then.